in college when your family got their first car?
And that's how we ended up over there. They bought that house. They were
So they bought a house brand new?
buying. Yes.
Five, four,
Who knew that? Who
two,
knew that?
one.
Palm Love would come up, like University of Palm Love, for like, I know you all know it's branch normal and AM and N.
That's funny. So for you, why is it important to focus on Black women in the queer community?
Again, there's this we have this amazing ability to put on this face, to put on this mask of like, I got this, my things are together, I can navigate everything while we are hurting. And I think that gets passed down through generations of, we have to be the strong woman and do with everything and nothing gets to us while we are crumbling on the inside and we are hurting. And keeping in mind, the cultural impact of like what we go through, like, intersectionality of being Black and being a woman. And how like there's your nuance, like things that we are dealing with from like the dominant culture, as well as, within the Black community as well. So for me, focusing on like women who look like me, allows me to create a space for them to show up as authentically as they can. To be like, okay, I can let down my guard. I can take off this mask. I don't need to worry about teaching someone about cultural things. Understanding everyone has their own relationship to Blackness. That's perfectly okay. But like, you don't have to like teach someone so much because I've gone through it or I focus on that. Like being with someone, be like, girl, yes. And then they get it. And we're just in that moment of like, I'm like, we're just, and because we're in it and it's beautiful and we're talking and we're connecting. And we need that safe space for us to figure out what it looks like for us to feel safe and to deal with our own trauma and how to break generational curses and things that get passed down to our kids, right? And even in the LGBTQ, as a queer woman, like it's important for me to also show up for my community. Realizing racism is still alive, especially in the LGBTQ community. And how do you create safe space for Black people who are of that community as well? I think like realizing pride, I get really passionate about this. So I'm just giving you a forewarning. Yeah. But like pride was started by queer women, right? But somehow it's been commercialized and it's being dominated by gay men, white gay men. Mm-hmm. So like it's important to make sure that's a safe space for us to show up as well and be authentic in our Blackness and in our queerness and however we show up. Because we're not really kind of given that allowance in some of these spaces, even though like the gay mecca, Wilton Manors is like literally like 20-30-minute drive. I used to work actually there, which is like a big spot for a lot of gay people to move to and live in. But there's a lot of racism and discrimination that's in that space. So that's also why it's focusing on that as well.
Right. Now that makes sense. When you think about generational curses, like, what do you, like, what's one problem or like cycle that you see that's like, yo, this is one of those things like we just gotta we gotta deal with, we gotta address, we gotta like, yeah.
Just one. Okay.
Name more than one if you want to.
I think the one that kind of comes into my mind, and this is also my own personal experience, is like this idea that women need to play second fiddle to men. And I know this is a whole controversial thing with like Kevin Samuels or whatever, but I think
it's free. It's your space. Like
I know, right? I'm like, what is like? Trust me, I show up in my space, right? And I think that start off with that one. That we are also taught that we have to be the strong women, but also kind of mute ourselves or dull ourselves down to allow other people to have that space to speak up for us. No, I'm going to take up space. I'm going to be loud and vivacious and like show up however I want to show up and however I feel like I need to show up. I don't believe that I need to mute my voice to make someone else comfortable. Do I believe I need to make sure I have a way of communicating that's also appropriate and respectful? Definitely. But I realized that and I've even had this issue in my doctorate program this past semester where I speak confidently and passionately, and I was going off my multicultural stick, and the teacher was like, you need to be mindful of how you speak and how harsh you come off to people. And I'm like, this heifer is tone policing me, is tone policing a Black woman because I'm passionate about something and I wasn't being offensive whatsoever. Oh, it was a whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
We don't do that. Like I handled it. I'm gonna put it that way. I'm going to take up space. I'm going to let you know how I feel and how you affronted me, right? And I don't think we give ourselves the allowance to do that, or we're worried about the outcome of that. So that's for me. Like, you're gonna see me, and this is me. I'm gonna be authentic, and I don't code switch as much as people would like me to do. I'm not doing that with you people.
Right. Yeah, and we're at a time. It seems like there was a big cultural shift. I won't even say cultural, but there was a big shift, obviously, last year. Hopefully, it's a shift for good and not like a momentary thing where, like, yeah, it was like, nah, this is my voice. This is going to be my voice, and I'm not holding back.
Mm-hmm.
I had a coworker, a Black woman. She's probably she might be mid-20s, something like that. When the George Floyd, the Derek Chauvin trial was taking place, like a little before the verdict, like the week of the verdict, my supervisor is like, we got to get prepared. This is the nature of our work. We had to get prepared for if there was protests, anything like that. And she was very honest. She was like, y'all might not hear from me. I might not be at work that day, depending on what news comes out. And I was like, oh, like that's extremely different from, say, 2012, right?
Mm-hmm.
When Trayvon Martin, like, which you had to deal with as well, because I think you were already in Florida around that time, right? And so, but there's been this like shift, right? Which has obviously been good for us and obviously, make things somewhat better, obviously, for Black women. It's like we haven't reached the mountaintop, you know what I mean? Yeah. But yeah, it's good. It's been good to like see that change, starting to see that change.
Yeah, even with Simone Biles and her taking that second back, like, I'm not there right now. And I think that we need these examples of how we are allowed to take time, take space for ourselves, really, like take a step back and say, you know what, I'm just like, I'm not feeling it. Me and my homegirl, she's actually a social worker. We would say, we're having a Black day. And that was like our day, our little way of saying, like, what's happening in the news is making us raw and emotional. And it's just not really a day for us. I remember working, again, at an agency which was geared towards the marginalized. And it was that week of Philandra Castile and Alton Brown, like back to back. And I walked in just raw and just emotional and crying. And I really wish I had the confidence then to say now how I am now, that I just can't show up today. I just cannot be in that space because I was hurting and I wanted to show up for my clients. So at the same time, I was like, I need to show up for myself a little bit more. I sat in the back and I just cried. And one of my, white coworkers came up and said, oh, it's going to be okay. And I'm thinking, can I curse here? Is that okay?
Yes, please. Yeah.
I was thinking, how the fuck is this going to be okay when two of my people were killed for no reason?
Right.
And I'm like, and I can't say that because it's going to be like a thing, right? Here you go, Black women speaking up for herself. Like,
now we gotta have meetings now about what I said when I was just speaking.
Right. And the funny thing is, it took me crying in front of our clinical director for her to have like this town hall for all Black people who work at the agency to speak up. And that same coworker decided it was okay for him to speak up. No, have several seats. And people kept saying, no, no, no. And he kept being like, but. I was like, okay. And that was also the same summer as Pulse. And that goes back to why it's important for Black LGBTQ spaces, because Pulse happened, everyone rallied. There was like a march. There was like coming together. We provide grief counseling and everything. But for Black folks, it was just like, oh, it sucks for you people. Oh, that happened in the news. I didn't know, right? So that's also why it's important for me to show up in these spaces and talk about that, because it's also something we don't talk about in the Black community.
Um, when you mentioned Simone Biles, one thing I think about with the Olympics and everything just taking place within the last couple of weeks, Simone has to deal with going to Tokyo and performing, which is not different from like 1992 Olympics or 96 Olympics, anything like that. But then when you factor in social media, right? Social media means like whatever happens in Tokyo, we know it in the United States the same day, probably within the same hour,
In
right?
the same minute, yeah.
In the same minute, you know what I mean? It's live. So she doesn't really get to like just have a moment to herself before addressing it here. Like and it came out that she lost her aunt, you know what I mean, during the Olympics as well, right? Which hasn't really been much of a conversation because we don't really care. Like we don't like as a society, we don't care that that's her reason for not. It's just like, oh, you need to go represent us. And like you are now like not a person, but our dream, our goal of what needs to happen. You know what I mean?
Right. No, like that reminds me of and I forgive me if I mess up this name and I really don't mean to be disrespectful, but Shakari, right? Like,
Yeah.
she found out that her mom died by a reporter during an interview. The
Okay.
levels of just like the levels of disrespect and like this is not a person to you, this is a news story. It's not someone's feelings. And I also wonder how being a Black woman played a part in that. Like, I want to see her reaction. Like, oh, I'm going to break this news, and without actually honoring that, like, people have things that they need to get broken to or narratives that need to be explained in a certain way. But like, you just do that. It's like you're literally putting someone in like this dog in this show. You're moving the pieces around to get this reaction because you don't see them as a human being. You see them as a puppet. And it's like so fucked up. I can like it's messed up. It's just so many levels of like I feel that pain. It was someone said that to me and how I would react to that. But it's like, dog, that's not okay.
This is where this is a reminder of like all three Shakari, Simone Biles, and then there was another woman who runs track. Her last name is Irby, I believe, and she was in one of the mixed relay. So I don't know if you saw this, but the mixed relay, she like started at the wrong place, but it wasn't her fault. The officials put the tape in the wrong place, right? So when she gets past the baton, she's a little bit further up than she should be, which is whatever. Like they end up correcting it. They still race. They made it to the next round and all of that. But what happened? Black male reporter, right? First person to talk to her after the race. He's like, now, did you notice anything that seemed off a little bit about where you were standing? And she's like, no, we'll look back at the tape and we'll see what happened. And he's like, well, but did you not pay attention? Like, and he's just like really coming at her, like for real. Like he's coming at her. And it's like, bro, like, what are you doing? Like, what are you doing? Like, why? Like, there's no point in it. It's four people standing there. Number one, it's her and her teammates, and he's just like locked in on her. You know what I'm saying? Ask all of them. Ask the women and the men that question, right? And just human to human. After you ask the question one time, and once you ask the question one time, you've done your job as a reporter, right? But now you have to like embarrass her,
right?
You know what I mean? So like, why that? And so there were moments. That moment in Shakari, in particular, I'm just like, no, like this is when we hear Black women say, "Yo, we're not protected." It's these moments too. You know what I mean? It's not always worst case scenario. It's these moments too. It's just everyday life. You know what I'm saying? Because I go with Shakari, where's the coach? You know what I mean? Where's the barrier between me and a reporter for somebody I know who knows me well to tell me, hey, your mom passed? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And same thing with Irby. It's like, where's the person to step in? Even the dude standing next to her in that moment, I'm like, bro, like you can stop the interview. You know what I mean? Hey, she already answered the question. Next question. You know what I mean? And so it's like these moments where it's clear. It's like I say this because in order for things to improve, we have to move forward on what we're debating, right?
Yes.
So in 2021, we cannot still be debating like, are Black women protected or not? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like maybe in 2015 or before, like, all right, but that point has been proven. Like we see that over and over, right? And so I don't know. There's no question there. That's just like
No, I again, like I wholeheartedly agree with you, and this is like I wholeheartedly agree with you. And it's like, and it's those little microaggressions, the ways that shows up that says, hey, I'm not safe here. I'm not protected here. Or we use our voice and we're like, how dare you? And we're like hammered down. And it's like, I know I'm not doing this with you people anymore. Like I'm tired of being hammered down into this little nub of, and then you wonder why we have these things that get passed down because you're not allowing us to be authentically ourselves. You're not allowing us. You have this idea of what a Black woman is supposed to look like, this aesthetic, this attitudes. And if you don't align with that, then there's something wrong with us. And it's like, no, you need to allow me to be whoever I am, however I show up and whatever it is. And it's just not a thing. It's like not a thing. And this even goes to like Sha'Carri, right? So I acknowledge I had a Facebook debate. It's not something I do very often, but I was like, yo, I stand with her after the whole smoking thing. Like her mom passed, emotional turmoil. Again, I am a licensed mental health professional. I'm going to be empathetic and compassionate, right? Well, I'm going to be. Can't speak for everybody.
right.
And someone, it was a gay man, and I appreciate him using his voice. I definitely always value that. It was, well, I can't stand because she said X, Y, and Z. I think he said 6 years ago. I was like, 2015, nigga, she was 15 years old on Twitter. She's, again, the statement was harsh and it was inappropriate and it was wrong and it was dangerous.
It's a teenager.
She's 15.
Doesn't even count. Like it just does not count.
Again, it was one tweet. Again, it was not okay. At the same time, she's 15. And then they made a statement of, well, she shows a trend of homophobic. I'm like, one time is not a trend. Oh, well, she said X, Y, and Z about Lil Nas X. I'm like, okay, well, what was that pertaining to? Oh, well, you know, his sneaker, the Satan thing. I was just like, so nothing to do with him being gay. It's a religion, Christianity thing. So how is this a trend against, you know, the LGBTQ? How is it homophobic? And for a Black man, gay or not, to come at sister, it was like, can we not give her grace? Because I'm also in charge of our LGBTQ program at work. Like I run the whole program. So maybe that might be a topic for one of the groups that we run about like navigating social media, you know, harmful language, that sort of thing. That might be a good conversation to have.
I think about it because even in my own life, I see where it can be a disruption sometimes. Sometimes you can be on the path of like, man, I'm reading my books. I'm waking up drinking water. You know what I mean? I'm listening to NPR, just taking in good news.
Mm-hmm.
But then like I can log in on Facebook and Instagram and whatever the vibe is there can seep into me. You know what I mean? And like really throw off my day, throw off my week, you know what I mean? And really have me on the like vibe that I really wasn't on and didn't want to be. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, social media is literally designed to be addictive. So like even when you and I were planning this interview, I had some papers that I need to get done. I deleted my social media. I literally had to be like, I allow myself to get distracted, you know, I have ADHD, and allow myself to get distracted by social media. I was like, I have these things I need to focus on. I deleted everything. I deleted Twitter. I've been deleted Snapchat. I'm not even big on social media, which is a funny thing. I deleted my Facebook Messenger, Instagram. I did re-download Instagram because there was this party I wanted to go to and I'm waiting for tickets to drop. But then I got the tickets, you know, Carnival. Okay.
Right.
But I got the tickets, then I immediately deleted it again. Like I have it, but I've gotten way better at like dialing and checking out of it. Because honestly, I'm happier just like laying around and watching my anime. Like I'm happier talking to my friends or like reconnecting or just honestly like my introvert side has been kicking in really heavy lately. I'm just happy being home alone by myself. But yeah, social media is designed to be addictive, and I think we just need to disconnect from it as much as we can to make sure we're preserving our own mental health. We also don't have control over the trauma that people put us through. Like I'm over trauma porn. I'm over people. Look at this black man being killed. And here's a whole video, and I'm putting it up there. I'm like, can we not share trauma porn? Can we not share more people of us dying and desensitizing us to these? That this is a normal, common thing, and it shouldn't be. It is common, shouldn't be normal. So even then, I'm very mindful, not even resharing those videos, but like it's just too much bombardment of stimulation, and it's like we don't need that.
Yeah, I was telling somebody, I'm still not sure if I watched the George Floyd video or not. You know what I mean? Sometimes you see snippets and you're not even trying to see anything. But I was telling somebody like last summer, I was like, yo, like imagine like going to a zoo, going to the lion's cage, putting a TV in front of the lion of people just killing lions. That's gonna like fuck that lion's head up. You know what I'm saying? Like, and that's a lion. So like, imagine what would happen to a human being. And I'm like, that can't be good for us. You know what I mean? Like, they cannot be good for our brain. Like, you want to stay aware, sure, but we do but that's the thing that like kind of creeped into social media as well. When social media, and I'm going to sound old when I say this, but when social media started, there was a limit on what type of videos been putting up, what kind of like images you're seeing and all of that. Now, everything's fair game. Like, I literally logged in Instagram one day, and this wasn't even police brutality. This somebody just shot somebody else. And it's just like, damn, like that's just here. You know what I mean? Like, I don't want to see that. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's one thing to see it in entertainment if I'm watching, like, I don't know, CSI or something like that, whatever. But like, this happened in real life. These are real people. Like, it's crazy.
Yeah. Interesting that. So like, speaking about this negativity, like, there is this really cute video of like these two identical plants in this museum. And they have these little kids say all these amazing, you're so beautiful, you're so green and luscious to one plant. And the other plant is like, you're disgusting, you're dirty, you're gross, ugh, right? You can literally see how the plants were growing with just that verbal onslaught of like positivity or negativity. And one's all luscious and green. The other one is literally, it's all shriveled and it's not growing and it's stunted and it's not doing so well. Like, we're plants, like, even water, like literally there's like a thing where if you talk negatively or positive to water and you freeze it, you can see the ice crystals form differently. Like, they're all disfigured and gross in the negative one, and all like perfect shaved and nice and now pristine in the positive one. Like, those are real things. And when we're getting this onslaught of like negative information, people dying, or ways that blackness is not accepted or honored or appropriate or whatever it is, it really does fuck with us on so many levels. Like, if we're talking about molecules in water, it's fucking with our molecules too.
Right. You can't always see it, right? You can step into a room and like, oh, it feels weird in here. Like, you know what I mean? You can't see that energy, but you can feel it. You know what I mean? So yeah, like it affects
you. Yeah, I mean, like, you asked that question before, and I'm not sure if I fully answered it about like what generational things, and like my own experiences. Part of these is my own sense of blackness. Like the fact that I am a black woman with like short hair and it's blue hair, and I got like piercings and tattoos or whatever. My mom was like, "No, you're never going to get a job. You're not going to be accepted," right? And it had to be me being like, "I'm intelligent, I'm smart, I'm professional, I know my shit. I will get a job. I'll be fine. If they don't accept me, I accept myself and I'll create my own job." Right? So like, that is a generational thing. That gets passed down of what we are allowed to look like or be or show up. Going natural in school and in undergrad, my parents were like, "What are you going to do with your hair? That's not okay. You're not going to get a job," right? Those are the things that get passed down about like what blackness looks like and how we need to be acceptable or appropriate and navigate the white man's world. I just refuse to like navigate off of that. I mean, I still have work I need to do. I'm not done with that, but fuck that.
I think we're really and I don't even. Sometimes I say we, but like I'm 37, so sometimes I feel in between. I feel in between like the people in their 50s and the people in their 20s, right? But I feel like what blackness is expanding. It is like we've been talking about freedom all these years, but now we're actually allowing each other to be free because we ourselves have put limits on what blackness is. Like, oh, you can't dye your hair. You know what I mean? You can't color your hair because you're not going to get a job. And the reality is, it's a bunch of people, with color in their hair, right? So my my part-time job, like my supervisor, her hair is blue right now. You know what I'm saying? Like, and being like 37 and I'm from the South, right? I'm a little conservative, right? I don't even say a little. Sometimes I'm conservative, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I know my brother called me out on it one day. He called me out on it in 2007. But I'm from the South, raised in a Christian family. You know what I mean? I was born in '84, but I see that changing though. So even last year, I had blonde hair for like, which was crazy, which is like wow to me. Like, and I felt safe doing it in a pandemic because I didn't have to go to work every day. You know what I mean? And one of my coworkers saw it recently. They were like, "Oh my God, you have blonde hair." It's like why is it not blonde now? And I was like, it was the same thing. Like I'm like, well, I literally cut it off because I was trying to get a job and I didn't want that holding me back. And so it's like it is like culture changing, and these like even I'm like fairly young, but even like it's these type of generational curses that like we pretty much all have to work on. The older people have to accept like the younger people are changing things. It's not that like they're just trying something, but like younger people are literally changing the workspace, right? Changing what it means to be professional.
Yeah.
All of that. And so it for the older people, I'm like, yo, enjoy this freedom. Like it's a freedom you all actually never had, but actually wanted. My aunt talked about like my aunt would always tell me like, and my aunt chopped cotton when she was a child, right? So my aunt would always say, growing up in the South as a Black woman, all I could ever be and imagine being was a secretary or a teacher, right? And she's like, you young people these days, like y'all can just like y'all just do everything. You can do everything. Like you decide you don't want to go to work, you do your own thing, you know what I mean? And it was like, oh, that's crazy. Like that is like all of that happened within your lifetime, within like 50 years.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? And so like it's dope to see. I like to see that like what we define as blackness is being like stretched out, being expanded, you know what I mean? And all of that. And like we're allowing more and like promoting more, you know what I'm saying? Not limiting ourselves so much.
Exactly. I've been literally saying this for years is that our parents' generation or my parents' generation was really to get the foot in the door, allowing us to show up, to come to these spaces, get the jobs, be in these schools, do those things, and allow us to be present, right? What we are doing is allowing ourselves to show up. We are actually truly allowing our authentic selves to show up in these spaces that our parents opened the door for. So I think that I appreciate them for being able to do that. And at the same time, they also need to say, like, you know what, we created this space for them to be themselves. And it looks like a short chick with like blue hair and like, professional with crazy nail. Like it shows up however it shows up.
And I'm doing my job well. Like my appearance, right? Visually, my appearance is neat. You know what I mean? Right. Still like whatever colors you see, however I fashion it, my appearance was curated, right? It's neat. And I still know everything I know, even if I look like, what professionalism looked like in 1985.
Yeah.
I still do my job well.
Right. I still show up and I'm able to have conversations with CEOs and owners of other local agencies and see my clients and be able to be fully present and engaged. And I will, not to be brag, I know my shit. Like, I think I'm actually really good counselor. I know how to show up regardless of what I wear and what color my hair is. And I think the fact that I can do that, people are like, okay, she may look unorthodox, but she knows her stuff. I actually feel safe here and I can talk with her. And I even asked, what's it like having a counselor who looks like me?
But yeah. So, but thinking about that though, You can tell me like personal practices or just things you encourage people you serve to do, right? We talked about food a little bit, but what are like some just regular day-to-day things you would encourage people to do, to like keep a good sense of self, to kind of stay centered and all of that?
Honestly, the biggest thing is breathing. And I think that's something that I've had to remind myself as well. But it's really sometimes we don't realize just the power of oxygen into our body and into our brains. And I don't know if anyone's experienced this, but when we get so anxious or wound up or angry, we realize that we're not really breathing as well as we need to. Like, we're not going to die, obviously, but we just feel really constricted.
But the shoulders are up here, like instead of like relax.
Right. And then like I've talked to people, and y'all can tell I speak fast, right? And they're just going a mile a minute, and then they gotta stop and they gotta keep going. It's like the fact that you have to take that big of a breath to like, let's take a second. Let's do a quick breathing exercise. Take one big deep breath in. I have so there's one I actually like is 478, only because it's Macon, Georgia's area code. Like,
right, true. Shout out to
so
Macon.
it's really like, it's like you breathe in for a count of 4, hold it for a count of 7, and you breathe out for a count of 8. That's it. And you do it as many times as you need to. Again, it's a 478 nostalgia, heart making.
Breathe in for the count of 4.
So you breathe in for a count of 4, and then you hold it for a count of 7, and then you breathe out with a count of 8.
Nice. Gotcha.
I like to say that, like, breathe in with your nose, hold and out with your mouth. Another one, I actually really like a square breathing, where you're breathing in with your nose for 4, holding it for 4, out with your nose for 4, holding that for 4, and then doing it 4 times. But I do find that like really helpful, because you're making sure you're breathing, and you're also thinking, you're being very intentional about counting and your breath and everything. So you're disconnecting from like what's happening around you and all the anxiety and anger or whatever it is, and you are connecting to breathing and your breath and the counting and how your body feels in those moments, right? So I really do love those. I think also journaling is really helpful. Even if you do it like sporadically, just getting something out, I think it's helpful. And something that I also work with my people that I serve is understanding how you feel. We confuse thoughts and feelings so often that it's like, oh, well, I feel that so-and-so doesn't like me. That's a thought. You're feeling it's anger, sadness, hurt, disappointment, happiness, surprise. Those are your feelings. And when we are able to better identify our feelings, so we can think, so why am I feeling this way? I also like to phrase it is, what is this feeling telling you? That's how I kind of prefer to phrase it. But it's like, well, why am I feeling this way? What is this feeling telling me? And then when you're able to like understand that, you can dig more deeply and like, oh, okay, so is this really something that's real? Or am I just feeling it and that's how I'm navigating? And so like when I journal, I try to journal circling around like, what am I feeling? What's contributing to that feeling? How that's impacting my thoughts and everything. And that helps me figure out what I want to do next. And it really just like kind of getting it out and having a safe space for me, it's helpful. That's what I do. Of course, I always encourage people to go to therapy, Yeah, it's helpful, right? Having that safe space is helpful. I think for me, I'm not opposed to it. I've actually had counselors in the past, and they have been helpful for me, as I have a pretty good support system, and I have journaling. So I'm good with where I'm at right now, but I'm definitely open to having a counselor. I don't think anyone's immune to it, or even this idea that you have to be ill or sick or have trauma or have something crazy going on. Like, no, you could just like realize there's something in life that's not quite serving you, and how do you like make sure you navigate that,